Okay, so, hi, Lucy. So we had quite a few other people, and I think part of it were competing with the Democratic Convention. So, and I just had a recommendation, don't change your time, but we are gonna record this and we'll post it on YouTube. So if you enjoy it and want somebody else to see it, we can do it that way. I'd like to introduce Molly Taylor, raise your hand, and Emily, who's joining us from, are you in Idaho? Emily?
I'm in Sun Valley.
In Sun Valley, okay.
So am I.
So is Sue.
Oh, hi.
Okay.
I didn't catch them, but
Mike and Leslie are up in Eugene, and Lindsay and Kate are down in San Diego. Hi, you guys.
hi.
And so, yeah, so at least we're going to teach a part of the state about what's happening at PT Ranch, which is incredible. And so, if, Emily, why don't you just give a short little intro to it, and then we'll go into the video that we made when we visited with Molly. But you don't have to go into a lot of detail, because afterwards we're going to have lots of questions for you. But if you have we're still getting people coming on, so that'll be good.
Okay. This is a piece of property that my father bought in the 50s, and you know, we've gone there for years as a family. And 3 or 4 years ago, we purchased the property from the rest of my siblings. And we decided to change it from a conventional ranch to a, organic, sustainable farm. About a year into that project, my daughter Molly decided that she wanted to leave the streets of Brooklyn, and she was just going to be here for about 6 months. And she hasn't left. The credit of building the business really goes to Molly, I have to say. But we've had a lot of fun learning together. We've done a lot of farm conferences pre-COVID, and now I'm getting out of my car, sorry. Anyway, so that's that. But really, Molly can take it from here. Thank you.
Well, we're going to hear a lot from Molly. And so the one thing I feel like we didn't capture, Molly, is the overall grandeur of the place. And I encourage people to go to your website, and you have such beautiful pictures in your gallery. But we've got some really cool up close and personal things. So
it's hard to capture.
It is hard to capture, and you kind of need to be there. It's just beautiful. And I think it'd be kind of fun to see some before and after shots too, especially as you get going. So here we go. I'm going to share my screen, and I hope I didn't have a whole lot of time to put this together, so bear with me if we have some glitches like we did last week. But here we go. Let me see. Here we go. PT Ranch. We just got a couple of title screens. I kind of did this like a storybook.
You know, these fields have been flood irrigated for at least 20 years. It's hard to tell from this angle, but there are actual checks that go this way. Okay. You can kind of see vaguely there's like mounds.
Oh, okay.
So the tarps, you can see a tarp over there, that they're probably irrigating these 2 checks right now. Okay. And then you can see the ditch is not full over there yet, because they're building the pressure to come out of the ditch here with that tarp. Okay. And then it'll flood all the way down.
They'll cover that up, fill that in.
Right, and then they'll let it go, and then they'll do the same for the next couple checks, and then this is what they call permanent pasture. Okay. So grazing year-round. You want to move your cows or your sheep so that you're giving enough rest and you're letting growth come back. Right. But if you have areas that are too tall, you're going to actually impede your flow.
Got it.
So it's been a challenge for me to get that right, because I want my water to move quickly. Okay. But I also want my grass to be tall and thick. Yeah. So meeting that in the middle is tough. Okay. Yeah.
So how often would you bring animals in here?
So this is like a 10-acre field, and it's currently just being grazed by Jack's horses.
Okay.
But what we'll do is we'll move animals in here quickly and then take them off for a couple weeks and then come back and during the grazing season.
Okay.
So it'll be much longer when it's not the growing season.
Okay.
If that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So while it's the growing season, you move quickly, and when it's the dormant season, you move slowly.
Okay.
That's kind of the general rule of thumb. Yeah.
Is it any special kind of grass, or is this what would be here anyway?
It is special in the sense that, you know, anything that you're grazing your biodiversity will either increase or decrease with how you graze. So it was established here, but grazing pressure will dictate what thrives.
Okay.
So this is a Bermuda grass and a clover pasture primarily, and over there you can kind of see just by looking there's like some clumpy grass. Mm-hmm. Those are perennial like fescues, harding grass, and orchard grass. It's called a Freedom Ranger.
Okay.
And it does grow slower than the Cornish cross, which is what everyone's familiar with eating.
It's getting those big breasts.
And they don't have the big breasts that the Cornish cross has. They're also better foragers. They have stronger legs, so they actually like walk, which is great. They have less instances of heart failure. Cornish crosses will just drop dead of heart failure because they're growing so fast they outgrow their internal organs. So we like these guys because they match our system. They're healthy and strong. So next spring on the pastures where they were for the last 2 years, you will see the squares where the chickens were very clearly defined because of the manure. So rather than looking at it as like what you don't do, I think it's something that you can look at what you can do. I think when people talk about organic, it's like the absence of bad. You're not spraying, so you're organic. You're avoiding something that's bad. But regenerative is actually looking at what you can do to rehabilitate and restore landscapes. So there's not a set criteria of good and bad. You kind of have to look at your landscape and tailor a plan for your landscape, and every production system is going to have a different set of systems, and every ecosystem is going to have a different limit and a different requirement.
And the end result should be that when you're done, it's better.
It's better. And there's always...
You're not stripping the soil. You're not taking away.
Right.
You're making it better while you're growing something.
Right. And there are principles. I shouldn't say that it's just like whatever you want. There's definitely principles like reducing or eliminating tillage, right? Also eliminating spraying of chemicals, integrating livestock, keeping living roots in the ground as long as possible. So that, would be implementing cover cropping, for example. Right. Not leaving your ground uncovered is another one. So those principles are true, right? Every animal brings like a certain type of joy to your day, and chickens, they're just not maybe the thing that brings me joy. I like working with them, and they're very useful, and they're a great tool. They bring nitrogen to the system, and there's other things that they do really well, but I don't spend time just watching the chickens like I do watching the lambs or watching the pigs. Yeah. So yeah, it's important to kind of like listen to that. So this is in the process of, you can see some of the you can see the walnuts. They will drop this fall, and that will be more pig food. Okay. As will the acorns, which you're familiar with from Spain. From an economic standpoint, it's free food. I mean, black walnuts you can use them to dye. That's one use of them, and they are edible for humans, but they're very hard to crack. Right. And they've never really been used for production agriculture, but we can offset our feed costs quite a bit by just having them drop on top of the pigs, which actually is a traditional farming method called agroforestry or silvopasture, where you're basically stacking your enterprises vertically, so you have a food forest above, which is helping feed your livestock below. So the lambs were here when I got here, but there's only about 10 sheep. So there's also 3 years of sheep experience, but we now have 150.
Whoa.
So
In 3 years you went from...
yeah, we did buy 40, but we've also been keeping all of our replacement ewe lambs. So,
Okay, so
that's
you're
how we're
breeding your own.
Yeah.
In this case.
Yeah.
Are they any special kind?
So they're a hair sheep. They are special in the way that they're a hair sheep, which means you don't have to. Yeah. They do produce wool, but not enough wool where you have to shear them.
Okay.
So we don't shear. Buy a cut of our lamb, it would be small compared to probably what you've had in the past. But you might also be surprised at how mild it is. There's a correlation between the wool content and the gaminess of the lamb.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're gonna make my sister Susan so happy.
Yeah, so I wasn't a lamb fan either before I started raising these types of sheep. And then I became a lamb fan.
Okay.
Bring them! That's Owen. Bring them! Bring them! You got it! Bring it! Okay, give up, come on! That'll do! Come on! Come back! So I'm just training them to sheep now. But, come here. Hey, behind. So this breed was actually developed in South Africa, and it's a highly drought tolerant, heat tolerant.
Do they need to rub on something?
They do like to rub on stuff. Come here, Jack. So cattle and sheep, often you're breeding, but with pork and poultry products, that's a little bit of a different ballgame. Okay. You can totally breed your own pigs, but and you got a boar and a sow, and you have to know how to castrate piglets, and which is not as simple as castrating a lamb. We just get a little rubber band and we put it around their balls, and their balls fall off, which sounds hard on them and hard on people, but it's actually pretty low stress for both.
It sounds...
For castrating a piglet, you have to cut off their balls, cut them, and then sew them back.
Oh.
So.
Are they anesthetized, or are you doing that just real fast?
No, that's just, yeah.
I figured that was probably...
Yeah. Yeah. So, and if you heard the pig sounds, which was kind of loud, that is nothing compared to their blood screeching when they're mad. It's at one point I picked up actually a small pig in there because I wanted to move, and all 30 of the pigs surrounded me and started. It was one of the scariest things. I just put they were demanding that I put the pig down, so I was like, oh, okay, you can have him. What makes me enjoy it is I don't have a daily schedule. I don't have to go to a desk job, which, when I lived in Manhattan I did a few of those, and I sat through my day looking at a computer, and all I could feel was the chair, and all I could come home to was the headache from the computer screen, and I was getting pretty depressed. I was like, this is the future of my life. This is how I'm going to support myself, is going to an office and looking at a computer screen and dealing with body aches and headaches all day. It just seemed so unpleasant and so empty that I really didn't want that future for myself. And coming out here, it's every day is different. I'm working with my hands. I am sweating, and you get an endorphin rush from needing to really quickly fix a problem when your animals are running away from you or something. So there's always a little bit of excitement, and there's a very humbling reality that this is a super complex system, and I'm just one part of it, and I can try to facilitate its growth, but it's never going to be fully understood I'm never going to fully understand it. And so every year, with that observation,
It's like being the conductor of an orchestra.
Right. And I think that there's this mistaken idea that, we should that humans are what's wrong with the planet, and in many ways we are, but we also can't remove ourselves from these systems. We've changed them forever. So at this point, we are the permanent steward, and we have to take that responsibility seriously. I think if we look at our forests in California, it's a great example of when we assumed that wild habitat meant that we should remove ourselves. And the only thing that happened was, we didn't have wildfires for years, and now we have catastrophic wildfires. I think we've been, running away from diversity for a long time, and we've kind of chased this dream of higher profits and, if you more inputs, higher yield, more profit, and it's been proven to not be the case. And I think that with the amount of, the depleted soils that we have in the U.S., we have something like 15 years of, agriculture as we know it left with the current rate of which we're losing our topsoil due to conventional agriculture. So, yeah, it's a very short window of time.
So there is a look into the life of Molly and Emily and the farm.
Thank you, Anne. Oh my God, that was the first time I saw that in its entirety.
I'm so sorry. I should have warned you.
I love it. I love the whole thing. Even the clip about the cutting the balls off.
I mean, it's a real world thing, because Justin, the video guy, included that, and Kelsey and I would say, do you think she might? But this is the life of it, So anyway, there's more. He's got great footage of you that we'll send all of it to you, and I hope you can use it for your marketing. But I felt like it was a good sense of what I cannot imagine. You guys, she has been doing this 3 years. And your knowledge of you accumulated is incredible.
Thank you.
So anyway, let's take a little break and talk about food and wine. And I'm going to turn it over to Justin a little bit, and then we're going to come back and have a conversation with Molly and Emily. So Justin, take it away.
Okay, so in our glasses, some of us, we have Zinfandel, and we've paired that with PT Ranch chickens made into a terrine. I use Molly's birds a lot. It's like, how long can I keep Justin's pantry menu away from chickens? And then it just comes back around to chickens, which is a good thing because it's reliable. And I love to use them. I love the flavor of them. Molly talked about how the breasts are smaller, but the legs are stronger, and you really get that in the flavor of the bird. So I always try to keep these birds whole and not, you pull them apart and they look small, and so I try to keep them whole. But in this case, I pulled them apart and made a terrine that I included some of Kelsey's foraged porcinis and then someone else's foraged morels, and those made it into the terrine with tarragon and parsley. And the Zinfandel is a good match. Zinfandel seems to be my fallback pairing because it's just lovely and neutral. It works well with things that are bold in flavor, and also works well with food items that are kind of on the lighter side. And this chicken is on the lighter side. I personally would like a little more fat with it, but since I don't have the fat with it because it's a lean bird, and not trying to water that down, I say, with pork fat or something, instead we go with something sweet, and we have an onion lavender marmalade. I chose lavender because I know that PT Ranch has lavender typically, but I sourced my lavender from a wreath that I bought I traded for last Saturday. So I literally, I'm looking at it up on the counter, and I tore it apart, and
It's a mess in our kitchen.
Yeah, I was on the way out the door.
I thought the cat did it, and I came home and I was like, oh my gosh, you'll never guess, but Loki just, he like, because it's hanging in our kitchen window, and I was like, oh, Loki loves to sit up there in the windowsill, and it was just
Yeah,
all over.
it was kind of splattered everywhere. But so we have onion lavender marmalade with some orange citrus flavor behind it, and that sweetness paired on top of the terrine really replaces the fat and richness. And so it all comes together. By itself, the terrine is just a tad dry, but when you pair it with something like the Zinfandel, which adds this zippity, I was actually really surprised about the mild fruit on the Zinfandel. It's changed so much since the last time I tried it. I think it's really backed off on the fruit, and it's starting to show its age a little more. Not the tertiary notes quite yet, but it's pretty lean, just like the chicken is. But besides that, I just want to say thanks to Molly and Emily. It's really fun working with you guys because of your passion and your willingness to put in the work and throw around ideas. I've had the opportunity to go visit the ranch quite often, and it's just wonderful. It's wonderful to have young people in the community trying to do something. And I mean, I drove out to PT Ranch 2 days ago to pick up a couple chickens for this terrine, and then Molly paid me back the favor, and she delivered some more this morning for a Sunday supper. So it's really something that we have the opportunity, and we're seizing it to really build what we want in our community. So thank you for that. And I'll turn it back over to Anne and probably to questions where we're going to go.
Absolutely. So anybody have a question for Molly or Emily? Oh, come on. You got to have a question. You got to.
I have a question.
Okay.
How do you train a dog to herd sheep? Like, is it just, are they born with that, or do you have to tell them what to do and then they just remember to do it?
Yeah, that's a good question.
You want me to answer?
What?
Do you want me to answer?
Well, I think I should answer because I use the dogs.
We're going to want both of your answers.
Yeah, we'll have both of us will answer that question because there's actually two different types of working dogs. I'll answer the working dogs that move livestock primarily, and then she can answer the question about livestock guardian dogs, which are definitely different. But insofar as the dogs that you use to move herding or to herd sheep or cows, they definitely have to be a breed that genetically is predisposed to do that work. But as far as training goes, it's kind of, you catch a good dog and then you encourage its good behavior. And there are people who specialize in the training to do that. The dogs that I work with are my partner's dogs, who trained them while he was working in Utah on a big permit with cattle. So his method is really in his own head. And I don't really know how I could explain his method beyond that. It's really watching the animals, and you either can use a shock collar or a rope. And if you have a rope on their neck, you can basically, it's all about pressure. So if the dog is putting too much pressure on the livestock, you just tug the rope and kind of bring them back. And you do that very subtly, but very quickly, to associate the sort of reprimand with the action and a command, a voice command, so that the reprimand, be it like a rope tug or a shock on a shock collar, gets associated with a word command that they then remember and can use. So a good dog can go in any direction. It can bring animals to
I'm back, Molly. Uh-oh. So I guess you get, Molly's frozen. Oh, she's back. Maybe, Emily, you get to tell your side.
Okay. Well, the white dog that you saw in there is a livestock guard dog.
And we got him about a year ago from Piscina's Ranch. He stays with the sheep, he protects the sheep, but he didn't respect the polywire. And they wanted to change from the netting to the polywire. Prior to that, we had gotten a dog named Osgood as a puppy, and I was told, oh, just throw him in with the sheep and he'll become one with the sheep. Well, at first he starts hopping around like baby sheep. Everything seemed fine until one day I kind of observed him and he was chasing the sheep and basically kind of biting their hocks. Long story short is when they get the taste of blood, it can go south pretty quickly. So I have not really heard a great way to train a livestock guard dog unless you have another livestock guard dog that's already trained. So we're hoping next spring to get another one, put the puppy in with Owen and have Owen basically train that new dog to respect the fence, to respect the sheep. One very sweet story was this past spring during the lockdown. My other daughter, Madeline, and her boyfriend were living on the ranch as well. And I came out to the field after helping with the chores, and I see all three of them, Molly, Stoddy, and Madeline, trying to pull a sheep out of a ewe giving birth, and they were having a hard time. Anyway, we finally got the baby out, and we just kind of left her in the field with the mother. And I kept going back, and Owen, the livestock guard dog that is trained to the sheep, did not leave the baby the entire day, just stayed there.
Oh, wow.
So they can be really powerful dogs if they're trained well. And our other livestock guard dog is named Osgood. He's become a pet. He's very high maintenance. He's a wonderful dog, highly intelligent, but definitely was not trained like we should have trained him. So.
Is that a particular breed, those big white dogs?
The white dog is, Molly, what's that breed? Is well, Osgood is a Kengal and an Anatolian, I believe.
Okay.
And Molly, what's Owen?
Owen is the Great Pyrenees.
Great Pyrenees. And so they tend to be a little bit gentler.
Okay.
So.
I mean, can they really fight off a mountain lion? I mean, that's what I've heard, which seems amazing.
I've heard that mountain lions can give them a run for their money. One of the things that Ned and I like to do is in the afternoon or the evening, sitting with a really nice glass of Yorba wine on the lawn, is to just let Osgood kind of free roam. And if he zeroes in on a coyote, we let him go. And it's like kind of National Geographic Live. And we sit there with our Yorba wine and we watch this kind of unfold. And he'll go out the back 40 and chase whatever predator. And so these dogs are known to not really engage in an attack, but to chase predators away. And so Osgood will have kind of a boundary of where he doesn't want a coyote or a mountain lion or a bobcat in his kind of realm. And it's fascinating to see. It looks like he's gaining on them in terms of speed. Sometimes he goes over the next hill and I'll hear yapping. He always kind of comes back with a smile on his face, like I've done my job. The first time he did that, I was actually running and he got away from me and went into a den and I started running towards the yelping, and then I thought, well, what am I going to do? When I get to the den with the coyotes and Osgood. And so I started running back thinking, now I'm going to have to tell Ned, Madeline, and Molly that the dog's been killed by a pack of coyotes. And he kind of came trotting out of that situation like it was no big deal. They're pretty fascinating dogs. This is probably one of the smartest dogs I've ever seen, ever had, personally.
Okay, another question? I've got a whole bunch. So go ahead, Kate. Unmute yourself, Karen. There we go.
Hi, Molly. I'm wondering, you've been doing this for a few years now. Is there a time in the day that you particularly love? Or is there something that, like something that happens every day? Because I know your days are so varied, but is there a moment in the day that you look forward to?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually the morning chores can be really nice. It's sometimes a bummer to get out of bed on a morning that you would have otherwise liked to enjoy a cup of coffee or something. But on the flip side, at the end of it, you have this kind of great sense of accomplishment, and you, without even realizing it, you've done like 2 hours of physical labor. And you've also spent, in my case, I've spent time with a milk cow, chickens, ducks, lambs, pigs, dogs. I mean, so, and every animal requires a different, task. So, I milk our cow and then I do something else, and it's a very different relationship with all of them. And that is, it can be frustrating sometimes to, my mom and I love to negotiate about how many milk cows we're going to sell this year, how many milk cows we're not going to milk this year. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's to come back into my house at 9 a.m. and feel that sense of accomplishment is, I feel pretty lucky having that.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, Sue, unmute yourself. You guys, I think you can all unmute yourself if you want. Because there's not that many of us, and just if there's background noise, keep yourself muted.
Okay, so my question is, you have your lambs, you have your pigs, you have your chickens. As you go through this and develop your property, are there one of them that you're kind of leaning more towards? Do you see yourselves kind of focusing on one of the livestock?
I mean, I think the strength of our system as it is the diversity. They all do actually perform different tasks, and they can be seen as different tools. Like, for example, our sheep are kind of like our lawnmowers. If we took our sheep out of our system, we'd have a big problem on our hand. We'd have grass coming out of our ears. The pigs are helping us in areas that need a little bit more attention, that have been neglected, because they're kind of like shovels. The chickens, because we're feeding them all this feed, because chickens require additional feed, they're depositing nitrogen into the system, which is what people pay a lot of money for in the form of fertilizer. The milk cows are also kind of like lawnmowers, but then they're producing milk, which we eat and we also feed to our livestock. So our chickens will get raw milk and our pigs will get raw milk from the cows. And yeah, so I see them as working together. And if I was to take one out, I would probably be missing one of those tools. So I'm trying to understand each livestock for what it can do, and actually move them in kind of a pattern that relates to that tool, and hopefully highlight their skills, and also manage their destruction, because they can be very destructive if you don't manage them.
That's one thing I wanted you to go into a little bit more, that you explained to us when we came out to the farm, is your idea of how you're doing the grazing and keeping them in small lots, but then moving them as soon as you think it needs to.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the basic principle is that a grass, if it's this tall versus if it's this tall, I don't know if you can see my hands, but if it's twice as tall, it's going to have twice the amount of capacity to photosynthesize, which also means it's going to have twice the amount of capacity to create carbohydrates, which means it's also going to have twice the amount of capacity to actually liquefy carbon into its root system and deposit that carbon into the soil, which, if you're a soil nerd, translates really interestingly into both climate change mitigation and increased fertility on your farm. So we're trying to move quickly enough so that our animals get a little bit of a graze, enough to shock the plant and make the plant want to regrow and regrow quickly, but not overgraze them to the point where they're really stressed out and they can't regrow.
And then a little bit back to the agroforestry.
Mm-hmm.
That was very, very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, the basic premise is that trees are a perennial crop. They don't die every year. They're there for many years in a row, which means that they're a great source of carbon sequestration. We're all familiar with the tree as the symbol of, drawing carbon out of our atmosphere and putting it back into our soils. But that actually directly relates to fertility in your soil on your farm, which also has a positive benefit to the grass that's growing around those trees. And when you consider, like the last week, which was 105, a lot of our livestock, especially our chickens, like they can't survive when it's that hot. So the shade in our environment is super important. And then if you want to get fancy with it, you can select species, or like we have naturally here, oaks that provide acorns. You can match that crop with a livestock like a pig, and then that can create extra forage for that animal. And can supplement its feed source, and in some cases replace it altogether. So that's kind of where we're moving with agroforestry. We're hoping to establish a much larger silvopasture, which will be providing most of the feed seasonally for our pigs. So like apples and fruit and nuts for the pigs to eat as it drops.
Okay, Emily, it sounds like you have been doing this like you studied it through college, got your PhD, and now you're doing it. So I'm very impressed.
Thank you.
Same here. It was amazing. Justin, you had a question.
Yeah, how do the ducks and turkeys fit into that system? Are they more of like a cash crop? Just because you didn't kind of provide an example.
Right. Yeah, so all poultry are going to provide nitrogen to your system because when they eat the feed that you give them, their body is designed to poop it out as nitrogen, which is really awesome. And in particular, ducks actually and turkeys, they're both very well equipped to eat bugs, as are chickens, but actually ducks and turkeys are a little bit more of like a bug hunter. And the kind of ideal system would be to have your poultry moving behind your ruminant animals. So as you're grazing your cattle or sheep, the ideal system would be to have your chickens, ducks, and turkeys actually move behind the animals as they transition to the next pasture, because the manure from those ruminant animals is going to attract a lot of flies, and the poultry will eat the fly and the fly larvae. And it actually creates two benefits. It creates a food source for the poultry, and it decreases your fly population, which can create problems for cattle, and it can actually decrease your just the pests in your pasture that worms and things in your animals that will create health issues down the line. So that's kind of where we're moving. We do that slowly, but ideally in the future, we do that really quickly. So right after the sheep or cows move off the pasture, the poultry would come in and kind of be like bug control.
I have a question. What is the purpose of feeding the chickens and pigs cow's milk? Like, what does that do?
Yeah, that's a good question. The milk is really kind of like a fat that is very valuable in the sense that it's just nutrient rich, and we go to all this time to milk the cow because we want to use it for our own enjoyment, but it's very nutritious. So instead of throwing it away, we want to add it to our food stream by providing that to our livestock. Apparently in the pre 1930s, there actually wasn't really a market for milk. There was a market for cream, and milk was traditionally fed to poultry and pigs because there was an excess on the market. And now there's great demand for milk, so that's not really an issue, but it historically was used as a feed source for poultry and pigs, and was just a nutritious way to get them fat, basically.
And there's nothing wrong with adding more fat to your protein.
Good
That's
fat.
always a good thing. Put more fat in the protein, good thing.
Does the milk get added as liquid to their diet, or do you mush it up with feed or something?
We typically will just pour it into like a feed pan and they'll drink it. And it's pretty fun because like the chickens will flock to it and they'll drink it and they'll kind of throw it up and like drops will be falling on their face. And the pigs, actually, it's almost dangerous. They love it so much that you have to get in and get out when you're feeding them the milk because they smell it in the bucket and it's like an all-out war for the milk.
I mean, just what they were doing for the water spout.
Right.
They were all just like going after this water thing and just yelling at each other and making an incredible amount of noise. I can't even imagine with milk.
Right. Yeah, they have attitude, and they were kind of giving us a show because we disturbed their nap time, and then they got up, and then they were all grumpy, and they had to drink water. But
okay.
Yeah, with the milk though, it's far more intense.
Wow.
Anybody?
Molly, I have a question. Is there any creature or part of the puzzle that you don't have at the farm yet that you'd like to introduce?
Yeah, we don't really manage our own cattle. We have a small herd of milk cows that's really kind of for our own benefit, but we don't produce beef at the moment. There are cattle grazing on the property, but we don't own them. We don't manage them today. At the end of the year, we will manage cattle, but again, it won't be for beef. It'll be more of a really like a service that we need because we need that grazing done. But eventually providing grass-finished beef would be a goal. It's just I'm kind of focusing on, because we started this business on a small footprint of our overall property, I needed to start with things that didn't require land. So beef would kind of be the final, one of the facts that we will produce one day, but not really is in our repertoire yet.
Okay, Molly will be back. Okay, it looks like you're back, Molly. You froze up.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
My internet is kind of bad.
That's okay. You live out in the rural area.
Yeah, I was just saying that we don't produce beef.
It was just towards the end there. Molly, talk about a little bit about marketing this kind of meat, and trying to encourage people to pay the extra that they need to pay in order to get this quality. I'd imagine that in itself is a whole story.
Yeah. It is. I mean, our meat is really expensive, and I think that and it's not just us. I mean, it's this type of meat that's produced is going to be expensive, and I think I remember going to grocery stores before I was involved in agriculture, and I would see a huge price difference, and I assumed that someone was ripping me off. So I would always go with the cheaper one. But really what was happening is I just didn't understand the food system, and I didn't understand how producers were either not being properly compensated for their work and for the product they're producing, or that the animal itself was being in some way mistreated. So what we produce is a very expensive product for us to produce as well. The quality of feed that we feed them, the way that we manage them, that's a very expensive process. Not to mention actually going through the USDA inspected process of getting it slaughtered and cut and wrapped. I actually just got off the phone with my pork butcher, who is no longer taking federally inspected pigs. So there's things like that, which, there's only a handful of them in the state that will even take federally inspected pigs, because in order for me to sell meat to you, it has to be inspected by the USDA. So now that he's out of the business, I'm scrambling. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Oh no.
And, we'll still get pork to you one way or another, but it's a big upset. And there's actually, for my scale, which is small, there's very few alternatives when it comes to processing. So if, for example, when this guy decided not to do it, I'm kind of over a barrel. Like, I don't really have alternatives, unfortunately. And that contributes to the price tag. Is it's very expensive to grow and it's very expensive to process. But the flip side is that you're getting a beautiful product that's healthy, that was regenerating a landscape and was paying a farmer to do it. So
can I add on to that? Just to give an idea for people what that translates in price tag wise. I bought the chickens I buy from Molly, I get for like $5.50 a pound, which is I think a little less than what she sells retail to customers who buy at farmers market. Not much less, but slightly less. And then you can imagine a 4-pound bird, we're up to $22 for a bird. If you go to the store, you're looking at a bird that weighs probably like 6 to 8 pounds instead of 4 pounds. There's one thing. And also that bird costs you $7 to $9.
But it's not good. We don't like it.
It's a different, and so then also when we think about, I don't have a problem paying Molly, and then I have to think about as a cook, well, how am I going to sell this bird that costs me $22, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you go to a restaurant and you don't want to pay $22 for a chicken breast. Like, and I'm selling, the whole bird costs me $22, and I'm trying to do the same thing Molly does, where provide myself a living wage. So now I have to turn this 4-pound bird and sell it for $45 to $52
as a meal too.
And so it's expensive, but then it's kind of what's your culture and what is our purpose. And so like on my end, I can't slack one week and decide to just go buy cheap pork, because that's what I think of it. It's just cheap pork, because if I go buy cheap pork, my price goes down. People are expecting a certain quality. We kind of build an idea of, we build a culture of what we're doing. And it's difficult. And so at the end of the day, like for me, I have to go and like, now we have to make our sides. Our sides have to be all delicious to make that $52 seem like it's totally worth it. But I'm just trying to point out how expensive our food should be.
And we should pay more. It's where's Sue? Sue she had read the study about as a nation, we pay so little percent of our income on our food compared to other countries, and it's kind of crazy. And it's also, we expect to have like a half a chicken on our plate. Well, really, you just need even a piece and your chicken has so much more flavor. A little goes a long way. And so if you took your plate, should probably be a quarter protein, and the rest would be veggies.
I think the mantra for Amador County as like a food scene, a wine scene, what are we calling PT? We're calling it's like it's all around like a good recycling like facility to get this wonderful product of food. And so it's quality over quantity. And I think that Amador County is totally like summarizing that into its mantra. Like we're speaking that. Justin speaking it, Molly speaking it, Ann speaking it. It's just we're focusing in on what is important. Let's feed our community and let's feed each other, and then let's also feed like our bodies really wonderful stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I encourage everyone to go to YouTube and watch Super Size Me 2. It's called Holy Chicken, and he dives into the poultry industry, and it basically elucidates the price tag on chicken today. And the short of it is that poultry farmers are not being paid a living wage. Many of them are in catastrophic debt and may never come out of it. And as a result, they're going to lose their farm and they won't be able to pass it on to their children. So we're in a place in our country with poultry farming in particular where we're kind of at the end of the road. It's just important to remember that sometimes cheap, it does not mean fair. And yeah, I had a really interesting anecdote from a customer who grew up in Spain, and then his family immigrated to the US, and he bought our chicken, and he said that when he cooked the chicken, it reminded him of when he was young, because they reserved chicken only for their Sunday meals, because chicken growing up was actually one of the most expensive meat products that you could buy. And it was supposed to be special. And today chicken is kind of like, you get it everywhere, it's really cheap. But historically it wasn't that way. And I think we kind of need to remember that maybe we've gone too far in artificially deflating the value of the protein, to the point of real detriment both to our environment and to the poultry farmers. So.
We applaud what you do, Molly.
Really morose, intense statement, but
no, but it's
it was well said. It was well said.
Very well said. And I hope when you go to those farmers markets and people come up to you and tell you stories like that, it makes you feel really good.
It does. It really does.
Good. And I would imagine once they take one of your chickens home and cook it, they're back the next week to get another.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions?
People love the chickens that I'm selling. I mean, we posted a menu this morning and we've sold 6 birds already, and people expect quality from it, and they're getting it. So thank you.
Yeah, I've tried it. It's good, and I'm pretty upset that I'm not up there to try Justin's dish with this.
Molly, do you sell other places than farmers market, or how far do you reach?
We do have one butcher in San Francisco, and for the chicken specifically. And then as far as locally, you can always come to the ranch and pick up. There's a form on our website, and then Sacramento Farmers Markets. That's for our chicken. Our pork is going to go a little farther, and everything's a little different. But if you check out our website, it's all described there.
Okay, thanks.
Molly, can you mention briefly that regenerative certification, I think that you guys are in the process of getting, and that sounded really neat, what all you're doing there?
Yeah, so we're in the process of becoming ecologically outcome verified, which the acronym is EOV, and it essentially is kind of the anti-certification verification, in the sense that we're not certifying ourselves saying we're checking the boxes in not doing these harmful things. Instead, we're actually creating a real data set based on our landscape that proves that we're actually regenerating the landscape based on all these metrics with soil health and biodiversity. And over a period of time, we'll have to prove ourselves in order to maintain that verification. But the hope is that there's a few producers in the state and across the country who are already using EOV as a, identification, so that consumers can know that they're not being greenwashed into a product that is organic but is truly not doing much benefit for the ecosystem or its employees or any of that. So EOV is a really exciting new opportunity for people who care about buying good food to know that it really is good. You can't fake your way out of it.
Carmen, did you have a question?
I was going to ask about that as well, but my other question is, is there anything that would really help you to be added into Amador? right? Are there things that are sort of on your wish list? If only we had a cooperative access to a butcher, if only we had, if 10 of us could go out and say exactly the right thing to 10 friends to get them to come in and support, what would those wish list items be that this network and others might be able to help you realize at some point?
Wow, you actually named both of the things that would be on my wish list.
And I want to know the San Francisco butcher for when I'm not up here. When I'm in the other place, I want to know.
Yeah. Right. Actually COVID has, I think, highlighted, we've had more interest locally since COVID in our product than before. And I think it's highlighting for a lot of people the dangers of a more consolidated food system, especially when it comes to meat processing. So people are choosing to come out to the ranch and buy our product, but I would love it. If there was demand, I would make it a lot easier for people. Like, if you and friends wanted it, I would probably drop it off, and I would work to facilitate that type of, distribution system. Justin's laughing because he would probably be a drop off. But unfortunately, it's kind of too sparse right now to really make that feasible. So yeah, 100%. If there's interest, just give me a time and a day, and I will be there, and I'll make it happen. And hopefully, it'll catch on. And then yes, you also hit another major peril in this industry, which is processing. And actually, my mom is involved in trying to get a local slaughterhouse and butcher off the ground. And that's a huge undertaking. We really hope it happens, but there's a lot of, hoops to jump through with regulations and the county and the state and the USDA. So I guess stay tuned. And if you hear grumbling about a slaughterhouse in someone's backyard, remind them of all the benefits of bringing to the broader community. Because yeah, it does sound kind of, I don't know, yucky to have a slaughterhouse in your neighborhood, but think about it as high skilled jobs, employing people in your neighborhood, and, allowing people locally to buy meat from their county to eat at their home. I mean, at this point, that's a rarity. So yeah, very astute, but you name them.
Yeah, Emily, would you like to add anything? I mean, you had this ranch in your family. What got you to think about, because it sounded like you had this idea to make it this healthier, more productive place than once you took it on?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I think it started with, what does sustainability mean within a family? And in California, land is expensive. It's hard to pass on generation after generation. And so to me, what that meant was, creating a sustainable business, creating something that would be giving back to the land, regenerating the land, but also creating, I have two daughters, one that works on the land and one that works off the land. So what is going to keep one of them from saying, well, let's just sell it all and move somewhere else? But if you can create a sustainable business that's doing both regenerating the land and creating a profit, it's more likely that you can then pass that on. The land is healthy and the family's healthy. And so that's kind of what started me down the trip that we're on. Luckily, Molly joined, and I couldn't have done it without her. But yeah, I think that's what got me started about 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's amazing. You guys are, it's the leaps and bounds. It's pretty impressive. Yeah, exactly. Woohoo! Go Taylors.
Yeah.
And I mean, this whole series that you're doing is so inventive, and it really draws in all the elements of the kind of enjoyment of the food, from the food to the cook to the wine pairing. And it's just really, it means a lot to us that you put it together, and it's just so nice. Honestly, like, it's just so nice to see all these people virtually in the day of COVID. It's really nice. So thank you.
It just seems, we got to know where our food comes from. There's just no other way about it. And, you know, as I said, we'll record this if you guys are all okay with that. We'll post it and encourage people to take a look, but hopefully come find you. So as I said, it's ptranch.com, right? Or .co.
No.
.co, right?
Yes.
So ptranch.co.
Yep, and you can sign up for our newsletter, and my email's there, and just shoot me any type of question, and I'm happy to answer it.
Okay. So thank you all for joining us, and next week we're going to go to a completely different part of Amador County, Manzanita Ridge, who you guys, I think you originally worked with Sean of Paloma Pollinators, and he's got his own story to tell. And it's been really fun for me to get to come out and see your guys' operations. I so appreciate it for you to spend all the time, and it's been great. So thank you all for coming, and I think we should probably sign off, but thanks so much for spending this past hour with us.
Thank you, Holly. Thanks, Emily.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Bye all.
Ball.